Last time we were talking about, and I was thinking about this as I was preparing this lecture, I was thinking to myself, you know, this is all fairly superficial stuff. Stuff, okay. You heard me say stuff. Okay. Yeah, this is all pretty superficial. And the reality is that there are no wrong ways to interact with your client. Well, there are, but you don't have to use these statements or whatever. You don't have to use these. They're fairly superficial. And of course, you have to remember that this was written by 3 ladies from Bloomington, Indiana. So that might be something that fits in Indiana, maybe something that fits in southern Indiana, maybe it just fits in Bloomington County, but it might not fit out here, and that makes a lot of sense. Can you make a mistake? Sure, you can make a mistake. If you use this, the verbiage that they use, is it a mistake? And in some cases, it's going to be a mistake. And you can't let it get to you. I may say something to a client that works. I may say something to a client that doesn't work. You may say something to a client that works. You may say the exact same thing to another client and it doesn't work. That's just the way counseling is. There are no absolutes. One individual is going to appreciate the way that you talk to them. Another individual may potentially be offended. There is no right and wrong, okay? I'd like to tell you that there was a right and wrong. There are a lot of people there to be a right and wrong. But the reality is there is no right and wrong. It all depends on the situation. It all depends on the client. It all depends on how they feel today. Maybe one day it'll work and the next day it won't work. And that's just the way counseling is. So you just never know. Here I'm trying to tell you how to counsel, but the reality is I can't give you the right words to say. I just can't do that. I don't know what they are. These guys don't know what they are. Of course, these guys are, like I said, they're dealing with Hoosiers from southern Indiana. Hoosiers from southern Indiana tend to be more southern than they are Indiana. They tend to be more like people from Kentucky than people from Indiana. So it's possible that it doesn't work for them either. Why is this happening like this? Okay. The dominant culture in the United States, it is, we talked about this last time, it's considered impolite to interrupt. But taking in masses of information from the client, it is considered appropriate for the practitioner to interrupt in order to summarize. We talked about this last time. I said don't interrupt, just let them go. That's what I would do, but they tell you interrupt and summarize. That seems a little bit formulaic to me. You just need to let them go. I mean, if they're on a roll, let them roll, because if you stop their roll, potentially that roll will never start again. So you need to be really careful about interrupting your client. But this is what they want you to say. He said, trying to make it work. Okay, there we go. The client, I am really trying hard in school, but I can't seem to get the grades that I want. And they say something like, you sound discouraged because even though you are working hard, you are disappointed with your grades. So the idea is that you need to accumulate all the information that they have just told you and repeat it back to them to show them that you're really listening. Now, how many times do you have to do this in a counseling session? The reality is, as long as you're making eye contact with your client and they can see that you're listening and that you respond to them 1 or 2 times, you don't really need to do this. You don't really need to summarize. But if it's one of those clients that will not make eye contact with you, that keeps peeking at you from the corner of their eyes to see if you're really listening, that individual you'll probably need to summarize. You'll probably need this trick, and it is a trick, as it were. When I am angry with my friend, I tell her how I feel, and then she does the same thing again. And this is what the brilliant practitioner decided to say. Or maybe he didn't. No, wait a minute, go back. Where is it? Where's the answer? Well, where's the answer? Whatever. Okay, so when I'm angry with my friend, I tell her how I feel, and then she does the same thing again. What would you say to this young?
It sounds like you're unhappy because your friend has ignored what you told her about how you feel.
Perfect. Perfect. Much better than what I'm sure than what they said. This works so much better. Okay, let's see what the next one is. At the beginning of a session, this is you summarizing at the beginning and at the end. As I remember our last meeting, we focused on how distressed you felt about your wife's roller coaster behavior toward you. When she is friendly, you feel good and get more work done, and when she is distant, you worry and have trouble sleeping and focusing on work. Is that how you remember it? Okay, so we've had this wonderful summary about what happened, what he was talking about last time. What does it look like this wife's problem is?
She's probably not getting enough help or attention from her partner.
That's a possibility. Okay. Any other problem with this? Any other possibility as far as this lady's concerned? The spouse has come in. We don't know if it's a man or male or female, but the spouse has come in and they're complaining about the fact that their spouse.
Bipolar. There's no.
Bipolar is a possibility.
No communication with one another.
I'm sorry.
No communication. Like
Communication is
not
poor.
talking about it.
Communication is poor. We got bipolar. We've got depression. She's depressed. He's depressed.
He's depressed.
He's depressed.
He could be the one.
Or I mean,
or she.
the
spouse.
The spouse. Okay. We don't know. Okay. Is that it? Any other potential problem? Wow, this lady's got a problem. It's coming down really good. I was thinking borderline possibility. Borderline, hot and cold. Push me, pull me, push me, pull me. As soon as you show them affection, then they push you away. As soon as you stop showing them affection, they, Okay, well, let's see what happens at the end of the session. We have discussed both sides of the issues and noted the pros and cons of each direction we could go. I appreciate how difficult this discussion has been for you. For some of you, this is a group session. Okay. It appears that some members of the group seem to be troubled when people disagree with each other. And of course, aren't we all? Okay. During a session with a group, everyone in the group seems relieved that we have agreed to keep all the information confidential. At the end of this session with the family, Jamie and Mary, you seem to be ready to take charge of some of the family problems. It has been hard to disagree with your children on what should happen next. I can imagine that that your children are upset because you think they think your opinions don't count. You know, I tried to fix this thing and I just couldn't get it fixed. I know, no, it doesn't make any sense. And that's the way it's written in the book. It's irritating.
It's English.
Yeah. Reflecting meaning is when a practitioner expresses their understanding of the underlying meaning of what the client is discussing. Reflecting meaning is not as straightforward as understanding content or feelings. Reflecting meaning. So now we're interpreting what this individual is saying, rather than just reflecting back what they're saying. To understand meaning, practitioners need not only to be good observers of the behavior and tone that accompanies the content, but also must listen for the possible meaning a client is giving to a situation, an action, a thought, and a feeling. So all of these things are very important. When working with clients who come from different backgrounds than your own, it is particularly important to express your tentative understanding of their meaning. For example, a student from a Chinese or Chinese American family must always get excellent grades or be considered a disgrace to the family. And this is something that you need to understand about, though, that people from that select portion of the world The family, it's like they live within their extended family that goes back in time. So you have to understand just how they feel about their ancestors. You guys don't even talk about yours, but that's all they ever do talk about. You're going to embarrass the family, you're going to insult the family. If you do this is an embarrassment to your family. And it's not just the people that you live with, it's also your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents. You know, the Uncle Charlie, the uncle that 200 years ago won the Congressional Medal of Honor. You know,
My gosh.
I know.
I know, I was looking at the outfit too, it's like, oh man, I'm gonna get a shower and a zap.
Oh, wow.
I've-
It's right there.
I reported it to, oh, I felt another one. Oh my god, I'm gonna move. Hey, coming back to you. Okay.
Jiminy Christmas.
Yeah, I went and reported it to the office over here, and I was like, it's been like that since it started raining.
I just lifted weights. That thing weighs 50 pounds.
Oh yeah, 65 if I put this in there.
So you have to be careful when you're dealing with an Asian family because these individuals they're very sensitive to the fact that potentially they're embarrassing their family. Now, not everybody from Asia. It doesn't work with everybody from Asia. If you're from Cambodia, probably not. Laos and Vietnam, not so much. Korea, a little bit. Japan and China, a great deal. Okay, so you're dealing with a lot of different groups from Asia. And of course, Asia also includes Iran, Afghanistan, India. All that section that's Asia as well. As is the Philippines. In the Philippines, they don't practice this type of mind thought process. The client wringing their hands and looking worried. I thought we had a good marriage until my husband told me that he lost his job and spent our family money on seeing call girls. We are very religious and want to put this marriage back together. All right. Does everybody know what a call girl is? Does anybody not know what a call girl is? Does everybody? A call girl is a prostitute that you call on the telephone. They come over to you. Either come, well, you meet someplace. Okay. When you think of prostitute, a lot of people think of somebody standing on the street procuring a companion, but that's not always what happens. Call girls are a little bit more expensive, and you can call them on the phone. Escort services. Okay, so this guy's a very religious person, and he lost his job, and now he's using call girls. As interesting as that is. Okay. So let's see what the brilliant practitioner, has to say. I hear you value your marriage at the same time. You are shocked and worried about your husband's behavior. Is that right? Could you say something better to her? Religion seems to be really important to this lady. Not sure how important it is to him.
That's what I was gonna say. That's all like,
I can't remember what part of the Bible talks about prostitutes, but, or visiting prostitutes.
okay, what's wrong with him?
Yeah, what's wrong? Could you think of anything better to say to this poor lady? Leave him? It seems like
Really, is divorce legal in your religion?
it looks a little bit like potentially she has an idea about him that he doesn't have about himself. Yeah. I don't, like I said, I don't know where call girls fit into the Bible. I don't think they're in there anywhere.
Jezebel.
They have concubines, but I'm not sure about prostitutes. Is she deluded? She wants to keep the family together. He's visiting prostitutes. she's really, or somebody's really religious, like maybe he's really religious. We know that there are religious people that,
Cheat on one another.
yeah, cheat a lot, or cheat some. Not Jerry Falwell. Who's the
Maybe
guy?
he has an underlying, like, condition or issue that he's trying to work out, but instead of talking to her, to somebody in their religion about it, he, I don't know, disassociates himself from it, because maybe that's their problem, could be their religion.
Well, what would your suggestion be to this lady? She comes in, she drops this on you. What would you say? What would you say to her? What would you do next?
Have they had the conversation about it? Has she called him out on the call girls?
Well, yeah, okay.
Like,
Okay.
bring him in. That's good.
I don't know, maybe she's subordinate to him. Maybe she can't say anything to him. In some religions, some Christian religions, men are in charge and women are subordinate to the women. One of the largest religions in the United States feels that way. I mean, women are never allowed to say anything to men. The Baptist religion. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever been around those guys. They're kind of interesting. The women will talk until it's something really important, and then they have to shut up. So what needs to happen next? What do you think needs to happen next? If you were counseling this lady, what would you say to her? Wait a minute, didn't you say leave him? Okay. That's an idea.
And maybe ask if she's spoken or talked with any of the elders in her religion to see how to go about this situation, and maybe even further counseling
Okay.
for the both of them if he wants to. I mean, it's right now it's just her,
Yeah.
you know. So like what he was saying, kind of need both of them there.
Exactly.
It's just a one-sided story right now, so it's kind of difficult to say anything or do anything. So
Yeah.
we need both sides.
Right.
And then, of course, because they're in a religion, that's a third member of their relationship, so that's an important part that needs to be there as well.
Okay. Okay. So we've got a situation where this lady comes in, she drops this bomb on you, and you really can't help unless he's there too, right? So you're going to have him come in as well, because he's actually the one with the problem. She wants to keep the marriage together, and all you're doing is telling her. And if he won't come in, what happens next? I agree, she needs to leave him. Yeah, we need to do something to help this lady out. Is she deluded? Does she have a problem? Is this a codependency problem, potentially?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So we need to give her a little bit of a backbone. Maybe. Maybe. But, I mean, she may want to stay in the relationship and have it just exactly the way it is. We see this a lot in cases of an individual who, the husband is an alcoholic. And she'll do anything to keep the marriage together. And usually the only thing that she can do to keep the marriage together is to keep him, allow him to drink. And if she doesn't allow him to drink, he leaves. As ugly as that is. Okay. Yeah, this is a tough one. I mean, this really doesn't fit in.
Yeah, that's why I have a hard time with the religious clients.
Yeah. So what are we going to do about the religion? Yeah. What are we going to do about the religion? Maybe he's the minister.
That's why, it needs that influence in there as well.
Yeah. Religion's a tough one.
Yeah.
Because you can't tell people that, I'm sorry, your God's not the right God. You're worshiping the wrong person. Counseling group members, I really enjoy spending time with the man I am dating, but my job is so demanding these days that I am feeling stressed and worried about getting everything done. And this is what the brilliant practitioner decided to say. It sounds like you really value time with George and also want to do a good job at work. That is correct. What do you think she's gonna do?
Take it all upon herself and not share the load.
Well, how can she share the load? She can't share the load with the people at
Anybody.
work.
With her partner.
She doesn't have a partner yet. She just has somebody she's dating. He's not a partner.
She's gonna have to decide what's more important, more functional in her life at that moment.
Well, that's not fair. Is it?
You don't want to go crazy.
Oh, is that right?
She's probably worried that George might leave because she's working too much or something like that, maybe.
Sure. Maybe George doesn't trust her because,
George doesn't trust her at work. So.
Well, sure, she's at work and she says she's at work, or is she out at Denny's, having pancakes with somebody?
Or out on the field talking with people and they're talking to him. It's kind of like common with, I guess, women in the, psychology field.
Mhm.
I think a lot of women in the psychology field, we tend to come across that a lot. And I think that's why a lot of women are single. Successful women in our field are single or with same-sex partners.
It's tough. It's really tough. Who's supposed to have the more important job, the man or the male or the female?
Both, but it's not.
How can that work? How could that possibly work? My wife was being pursued the same time I was pursuing my wife. Somebody else was pursuing her at the same time. He was a pilot. He had more rank than she did. And potentially what pushed her away from him and toward me was the fact that he had intimated to her that if they had a stronger relationship, then she'd have to drop out of the service. She'd have to get out of the service. And that was a question. That's a huge question. So whose job is more important? That's the question. Is it possible? Can a male ego handle a woman being more important than he is?
Depends on the guy.
Yeah.
It really does.
Is he a real man if he allows his woman to be more important than he is? I don't know. In some cultures, I don't know. That's a really big question. One of the problems they're having in Russia, in the old Soviet Union, is the fact that males don't do housework. Males don't do anything. They come home and they drink vodka, and that's about it.
That's like here.
So the woman works and works her tail off all day. Of course, he works and works his tail off all day. And when he comes home, he expects her to have the dinner on the table. And okay. Does that make sense?
Culturally for them.
Culturally, the women are
Their
getting
values.
pissed because, it's not the happiest situation in the world.
Some Hispanic cultures, I think, are like that as well. You'll hear most
Sure.
of the women, they don't mind doing that, but they really do mind once you get into the kitchen and hear the conversations while the men are out there,
Drinking beer?
Yeah,
Okay.
so you can really hear their disdain and how they're not given the opportunity to further themselves educationally or even just in life.
Okay, we don't know what race this
Yeah.
individual is.
So
or
culture would probably
what-
play a factor in this
It
one,
could
with the
potentially.
values.
Well, what if this were a Navajo lady and George was another Navajo guy? We'll assume he's Navajo as well.
What Harley said. She's gonna have to decide, the time management, is gonna be a major thing. If she, like the practitioner said, she values time.
Right.
So time is something that is very precious to her and she works her life around that, so she's probably gonna have to go at it from a different direction if this is something she wants to keep doing.
What if she's a traditional Navajo?
And then gender roles will play a part in that.
Okay.
Yeah, and how she views it, how she values that. You know, like what we're saying, is it with
Right.
discussion 3,
Sure.
that would probably tie in with this one.
Okay.
You know, what parts of your ethnicity do you value and what parts you don't value.
Okay.
You know, so probably have to go through the process of elimination in her values
Right.
and see where this can fit in.
So all this is really important. I mean,
Yes.
who they are and where they come from and what their values are and potentially what religion they practice.
Would it be like more of a society thing or more of like a religious cultural aspect?
It's all culture.
Well, yeah, cultural that.
Right.
As far as like religion, it's not like embedded in Navajo stories.
Sure.
Christian Bibles say that.
Right.
Would it be more of a society thing that
Sure.
women are supposed to be to certain them?
Right. Depending on what part of the Bible you read, I guess. Yeah, exactly. I used to live in Omaha. Omaha is a very Catholic town. It's like 80% Catholic. But some of the Catholics are Irish, and some of them are Italian, and some of them are Slovakian, and some of them are Czech. So you've got all of these different groups and all these different ideas about how things are supposed to be. I used to work in a hospital. I worked in the morgue, and people would. So I got to see people when they came in to pick up their loved ones. And everybody had a job, but if they were Czech, they did it one way. If they were Slovakian, they did it another way. If they're Irish, they did it another way. The point is that you never know until you confront this select group of individuals. Somebody might tell you that, well, if you're a traditional Navajo, you do it this way. But the reality may be you've got somebody else who's a traditional Navajo from the western portion of the reservation, and they do things totally differently. So you got to be completely open to what's going on. Don't assume that you've got the answer to this Irish Catholic confrontation. So yeah, this is one of those questions that's going to come up, and you're just going to have to plumb what this lady wants to do. If she's a obsessive compulsive, anal retentive white lady who's dressed to the nines and she's ready to go out and conquer the world, then you can't possibly tell her, well, you need to cut back on your work so that you can find your one true love. And that's probably not what she's looking for. She's looking for you to give her the answer as to how she can put 26 or 28 hours into the day so that she can get everything done. She's one of those people that needs to get everything done. Okay, so it all depends. All this stuff depends on who they are. The family member, since Bob the father lost his job, it seems like we go from one stress to the next all the time. It is like everyone is worried most of the time, not at all like it used to be. Everybody's all stressed out. And this is what the brilliant practitioner says. So the stress related to Bob being unemployed is affecting everyone. Sounds like you are longing for fun times you used to have in your family. Yeah. So this is what's going on in North and South Carolina right now with all the flooding. Everybody's complaining. The families are fragmenting because everything was perfect before. They never had to worry about any of that stuff. And now they've got 8 inches of water and 4 inches of mud in their house. So they come in, they're all stressed out, so they come in for counseling, and what do you say to them? Well, it sounds like everything's, you wish everything could go back to the way it was, and maybe eventually it will, but right now, of course, it's not that way. So you're just gonna have to deal with the situation. I mean, buck up, little camper. I don't know that you can say that to anybody.
And then it's like Bob can't be the only one that's the target for that. Everyone has to assume their role in the stressors and how they even
Maybe
might
one of those
contribute
families
or
where only
add
dad
to-
gets to work. So Bob lost his job, now everybody's,
their role is full, so you can't even imagine what Bob could be even going through. And he's probably the one that went to go see the call girls.
maybe he wants to go see the call girls because everybody is so stressed out.
I think we found out who Bob is.
Write this down. Bob wants to go see Culver. Okay. Task group member, finishing this project is taking forever. I am sick of having to do so much extra work. I wonder if it is worth it. And this is what the practitioner says. You sound frustrated and kind of discouraged too. It sounds like you wonder if the project is as important as you once thought. Is that right? Pause for response. How are the rest of you feeling? And of course, he's talking to a group. When developing a relationship, it is important to deal directly with the diversity variables. For many clients, having a worldview similar to that of the practitioner is more important than differences in the age, differences in ethnicity, in race, in gender, in sexual orientation, in education, in physical differences. So you need to deal with all of these things. You have to understand that not everybody from a select era will act the same. Just because somebody seems like they're young doesn't mean that they are. That's one of the things that has been happening to me lately. I'm old, okay? I'm really, really old. My wife kept telling me how old I was this past weekend. She came to visit. And she kept telling me how old I am. Thank you. But then again, she just had 2 hips replaced. So compared to her, I'm really, really young. I mean, hell, well, she's really, really young too, I guess, since she has 2 hips that are like less than a year old. So, if they worked really well, she'd be in good shape. Language can prove to be a barrier even when the practitioner and the client speak the same language. One may speak in slang, one may speak using a great deal of jargon. The client may be from a region that the practitioner is not familiar with. Different generations may use the same words and phrases differently, and we just learned that from the Kavanaugh hearings. He said that a Devil's Triangle was a drinking game, and if you Google it, it doesn't have anything to do with drinking. It has to do with sexual intercourse, as strange as that may be. So, hookup is a good example. If I say hookup, I'm probably talking about my boat and my truck, of course. But if I'm talking to a kid, if I'm talking to a teenager, if I'm talking to somebody that's on Facebook, it probably means, and actually I heard this on television the other day. Wait a minute, I was watching a movie. And it was a bunch of teenagers, but he said to her, you don't have to hook up. Why did you have to hook up with that guy? What happened was they're underage. She gave the guy a big kiss, I guess. That's what she talked about. And then he sold her the beer. Then he sold these underage people the beer. This is at a convenience store. And the other teenager said to her, you didn't have to hook up with him in order to get the beer. That's what he said. And I was thinking, wait a minute, I thought hookup had to do with sex. Did she have sex with the guy in order to get the beer? I mean, he was the clerk at the convenience store. And one used the word hookup, and I was thinking hookup had to do with sex. So the question is, does hookup have to do with sex? Or if, wow. Yeah, okay. Here's something to think about. In the old days, if you watch an old movie from the 1940s, when they say make love, what they're talking about is flirting with each other. That's what make love means. But as time advanced, it meant to have sex. So the question is, does hookup mean to have sex? That's the question. Does hookup mean to have sex?
Depends on the situation.
Does hookup mean to have sex? If somebody said, Ben and Jerry hooked up last night, would you think that they had sex? Did they have sex?
Probably not.
They hooked up.
They linked up, probably.
Did they have sex?
It could be like a good thing that it was like made out or something, but to the extent.
know it's an ice cream and it's two guys, but
Probably.
Jerry could be spelled
Yeah,
with,
I would say, yeah, look up.
and she could be Benjamina. Of course, you could be two girls, Ben and Jerry, Benjamina and Jerry, Jerri. So we don't really, the ginger's not. Did they hook up? Did they have sex?
Probably, yeah, I'd say yes.
Did they have sex? Maybe.
I don't know what you want from or you'll hook up in the setting. Maybe we think of it differently.
Does it mean sex? If somebody told you that these two people hooked up last night, would you think that they had sex?
Probably in high school terms, adolescent teen, yeah.
Okay.
I think I'd ask for more detail than I just.
Man.
But
You're not
no,
gonna get
no,
more
I would not
detail.
think so.
This is a rumor everybody's just spreading
No.
around. Does it mean they had sex?
Before they have
Maybe we just something
So how do we know what time frame this guy's talking about? He's trying to spread a really good rumor, I'm guessing.
juicy one.
Yeah, they did have sex, thank you. Arlene, did they have sex? I thought so too. Travis, did they have sex? Of course they did. Wow.
Me and Denise are playing devil's advocate to get straighter answers.
Oh, this is too hard. This wasn't supposed to be this hard. It is important to express empathy in cases where the client is from a different ethnic group, from different age, different gender, different religion, has different physical abilities. Conveying that you completely understand how they feel is rarely accurate and hardly useful, and it's a lie. You don't know how they feel. You never know how they feel. I can imagine how you feel is something that you could potentially say. But to say that I understand how you feel, even if you've gone through it yourself, you still don't have a clue how they actually feel, especially if they are different from you in one way or another. And of course, everybody's different from everybody else. Does everybody understand how this lady feels about losing her left leg? We've all got our left legs, so I'm guessing not. No, probably not. Your goal is to understand how the client feels, what they experienced, and what meaning that experience had for them. And how in the world are you going to get this information? Well, the only way to do it is to counsel them, is to ask them questions. Empathic understanding increases the client's sense of being understood. It takes considerable courage to openly discuss concerns with a stranger. And of course, that's the reason you are doing this job. You're going to hear some very painful things. Sometimes you would think, well, it's not going to be painful for me, but the reality is, if you are empathic, then you will feel the same thing that they are feeling. You will understand the feelings that they have, not feel the same thing, same way. Otherwise, that's sympathy. All right, and that's the end of that chapter. By golly, finally got through something. All right, the next chapter is chapter 9. There is a chapter about online counseling. We have two individuals that are going to be doing the rest of this class through online. So we will be counseling select individuals from time to time online. All right, there's two so far. Their situations have changed and they can't come to class. So I will be talking about how we do that. Is it possible to counsel somebody online?
For some people,
With the newer generation, I believe.
Oh, this is the online generation. That's true. Yeah. So my goodness.
I don't know about counseling there, but as at work, it's like online is kind of pretty hard and intense because you have to do it yourself. Like you have to self-teach yourself to, like for my science class, she just throws me everything, and then like the lab, yeah.
So how you doing?
I'm alright.
Okay. Okay.
I see her.
Okay. Okay.
But
Well,
yeah,
not
it's-
everybody
it's-
can handle
it's-
online.
Yeah, it's pretty hard.
For older people, it's a little bit difficult because we're not used to thinking in that direction.
But I could say like I got more tech events and stuff like that, you know. I'm better where I was at
There you go.
before, you know.
Sure.
I think with the time constraint many people have with their lives,
Right.
work and everything, school, whatever it may
Right.
be, online could be the more convenient way of getting counseling.
It's the only way they can do it.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
only way they have access to that help.
Right. As I told you before, there was one of my friends was being counseled. They had 2 face-to-face counseling sessions, and the rest of them were online. The assumption was that they had advanced far enough so that he didn't have to see her online anymore, and then she did everything else online. I know. Well, it seems to be working, I guess. Anyway, we'll see how that works. Exploring with questions. Before asking questions, it is important to express understanding by reflecting. Remember, we're not there to actually to ask questions. We are there to listen to what they have to say. But sometimes you need to ask the right question to get the right answer, to get the right information. So sometimes we do have to ask questions. And you're going to have clients that won't talk. They don't want to talk. They want you to pull the information out of, and that's okay. I mean, that's just the way it has to be.
Do you take access?
Before asking questions, it is important to express understanding by reflecting their feelings, their content, the meaning, and by summarizing. Don't feel like you have to do this. If you have a client that is expressing themselves very well, then there's really no reason for you to interrupt them, to summarize. You need to show that you understand what they're talking about. But you're going to have clients that don't want you to say anything at all. They will allow you not to say anything, and you need to not say anything. Just because you're the counselor doesn't mean you have to talk. The best counseling sessions are the ones where you say as little as possible. Remember, Freud used to counsel his clients by sitting behind them and not saying anything, allowing them to just spew whatever it was that they felt like they needed to say. Of course, without any directive questions, a lot of times they went off into the ionosphere and they didn't get anything done. But the less you say, the better counseling session it's going to be. Questioning without expressing understanding may seem like grilling. So unless you can demonstrate to them that you understand where they're coming from, then potentially it's going to sound like you're a cop and you're trying to find out if they murdered somebody or whatever.
So in that instance, would you listen for like key terms or like a repeating phrase or a repeating theme?
Right.
So that way you kind of keep it guided and not just let it become two girlfriends having lunch.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. You're still in charge of the session.
Okay.
So you actually need to be in
Attention.
that position. Open-ended questions are questions that require more than 1 or 2-word answers. They invite the clients to express opinions and feelings. Open-ended questions generally begin with who, what, when, or how. How do you feel about that? Tell me about. And that is an open-ended question so that you can get the whole story. You're trying to make them speak in narrative. In other words, you want a lot more words than just a 1-word answer. Will you tell me more about? Is an open-ended beginning of an open-ended question. Will you tell me more and how you feel when? Will you explain more about? And of course, they have been talking about something, and now you want them to explain it. Tell me about who has helped you with this problem. Of course, they could just give you a name. Bob, okay. And then what would you say? How did Bob help? What's going on with Bob? Who is this Bob guy? How have other people helped you with this problem? What led you to seek help at this time? Tell me about improvements you have noticed since our last appointment. What would your life be like if this problem wasn't going on? Huh. Interesting question, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gets them involved in the
Sure.
counseling.
Yeah, which is usually the way that people think anyway. Oh man, if this hadn't happened, then I'd be here, I'd be there. You know,
And probably that's what's always running through their mind. And
exactly.
And they just need to express it loud enough and work it out.
Yeah, since we think like this anyway, well, most people do, is this healthy? Is it healthy to think of, is that healthy?
So think about your problem and try to work it out.
Well, you're not really thinking about your problem and trying to work it out. What you're trying to do is turn back the hands of time and correct what you did wrong. So is this healthy?
No.
Kind of.
It's regression.
Kind of. A little.
That's why
Does anybody think like
It's a
this?
loss.
That's a loss, yeah. It's okay, it's not gonna sting anybody.
That's the question.
Does anybody think like this? Ah, man, if I'd married that other person, if I hadn't married that, I know. If I just stayed with my second wife.
the major one.
Is this healthy? Is this good?
No, because you're doubting yourself and you're kind of enabling yourself from going forward.
Going back in the past, is it a good idea? Is it ever a good idea?
No, it's dumb.
Because we can't do it. Yeah, there's no way you can change the past. There's just nothing that you can do to change the past. And you don't know how it would have turned out anyway. There was one of the Twilight Zones. This guy was able to go back in time and change all the bad stuff that had happened to him. And it never made any difference because bad stuff, just because he corrected this one bad thing, then other bad things would happen because of that. And he'd end up not in the same place, and usually in a worse place. So you just never know. You just never know what's going to happen. I just talked about my second wife. If I'd stayed with my second wife, my goodness gracious, I mean, yeah, who the hell knows where I'd be now? I might be in a gutter someplace with a needle in my arm. Actually, heroin doesn't work on me. I know heroin doesn't work on me, so that doesn't make any sense. Okay, so going back in time, this really isn't helpful. What is helpful is dealing with the present and looking into the future. That's what is helpful. Not going back. Not ever going back. This is not a good question. I'm sorry. How about others? How have others solved this type of problem? How have others solved this type of problem? So other people have had this problem and they've dealt with it this way. Well, that's one way to look at it, I guess. Who have you talked to about this problem? Bob again, I'm sure. Who is this Bob guy you keep talking about? How did it help to talk to others about the problem? Is this a good question? How did it help to talk to others about the problem?
It's a positive.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a good question.
Yeah.
Maybe the other person experienced it too, you know? Like,
Sure. Yeah, that's a possibility. Sure.
So you get to figure out more ways to deal with or cope with whatever it is.
Sure. Or have they been keeping it to themselves? And this is actually what you're actually trying to get to, is whether they're keeping their problem to themselves. And of course, the more they keep it to themselves, the worse off they are. Tell me about what it feels like to have this problem. And actually, you're saying, what does it feel like to have this problem? Thank you. Forgot where I was going. Tell me about what it feels like that. Okay, I can't remember what I was going to say. Christine messed me all up. It's Christine's fault. How have you solved other problems in your life? I don't know. What do you understand about the kind of help I might offer you? What do you want me to do in this with this situation? How am I supposed to help you? Is that possible? What do you want me to do? I can't murder your husband. Tell me about what you have done to work on this problem. Once again, we're trying to figure out what they've actually tried to do up to this point. There are select individuals that don't try to solve their own problems. And it's relatively common these days because people are living with their parents for a longer period of time. So they're not actually used to solving their own problems. I am an idiot when it comes to cars, so if my car breaks down, I have to find somebody to fix it. I can't fix it myself. My thermostat wasn't working, my furnace wasn't working, and it hasn't worked since I got back from, where was I? Oh, I was in Iowa in August. So I haven't been able to turn on my air conditioner, I haven't been able to turn on my heater, and I didn't know what to do. And so my wife visited this weekend, and while she was there, I said, would you look, she's the one that used to mess with that thing, so I told her, well, what, see if you can do something with it. Well, it turns out that it had batteries. I had no idea that a thermostat had batteries. Anyway, it had batteries, and all she did was change the batteries, and now it works. That's how stupid I am. Okay, so sometimes there are people, well, like with my furnace, I wasn't going to do anything with my furnace. I bought $1,000 worth of wood from, I know.
How is that possible, Bruce?
What, to buy $1,000 worth of wood? What?
I don't think people even pay that much for firewood in the winter season around here. You just
I bought 10 loads of wood. I've got enough wood for all of us, okay?
come over and measure some of it with sticks or something.
got-
At least see if you can on an oak.
I've got lots of
Not just
wood.
all pine.
It's all aspen.
So you get light, but hardly any warmth.
No, it's nice and hot. It burns nice and hot. I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. Well, no.
Usually I have a mixture, but this year he's just cutting, and I kept asking him, how about a little bit of pine? How about a little bit of oak, you know? Nope. Next load was aspen.
I'll sell you a load.
I've already got $1,000. I've already got $1,000
That will trade.
worth of
We'll trade. Can't have you freezing.
All right, so what was my point? I can't remember what my point was. Okay, so what have you done to solve this problem? What I did to solve that problem, my problem with my thermostat, was to buy $1,000 worth of wood, just in case I needed to keep my house warm over the winter. And then my wife came and fixed my thermostat. It's got a battery. Who's ever seen a thermostat with a battery? Closed-ended questions are questions that can be answered with one or two words. Closed-ended questions are appropriate when the counselor is seeking specific information. How old are you? What's your address? How many other people live in your house? One-word answers. They give you the facts, and they're easy to answer, of course. So you need to stay away from closed-ended questions. If you want a session where the client talks, then you need to use open-ended questions. But if you're looking for information, like how old are you, what's your address, and whatnot. Skilled practitioners choose the type of question to ask based on their goals. Beginning practitioners often overuse closed-ended questions. So they're only getting one-word answers. One of the reasons we're going to practice in here is so that you get to practice, and if you're going to screw up, you're going to screw up in here rather than out counseling somebody. Using closed-ended questions may imply practitioners need to be in control rather than work collaboratively with your client. And of course, you don't want to do that. Some clients treat open-ended questions as closed-ended questions by giving one-word responses. This will irritate you to no end. So you'll ask them, well, how do you feel about that? Okay. I've had clients that everything was okay. I know, it's great. What happened then? Everything's okay now, you know, that kind of thing. Wait a minute. Come on, give me a little bit more, you know, so you're pulling the information out of them. It's like you're trying to tug their intestines out through their mouth.
Maybe they're on a time constraint or something.
They only,
And
I'm
they're
s-
like looking at the clock.
I'm sorry, I can only use 15 words and I've just used 7, 8, 9, okay. It is necessary for the counselor to encourage them to speak more, tell me more about this or tell me more about that. And of course, if they are that closed-minded, a lot of times you're not going to get any more information out of them. Very difficult. Closed-ended questions, when did this problem start? What do you like about school? What was your favorite subject in school? Closed-ended question. What was your favorite?
I think the reading.
Reading? Math? Recess?
Lunch.
Lunch.
It was a economics class.
Economics? Economics?
PE.
I'm sorry? Math? Art?
Calculus.
Calculus?
Yeah. It's a tie between speech and history class.
Oh, man, tie. Speech and history.
Speech.
I love science.
Science.
I love my teachership.
English.
Dreads. Just science.
Science?
Naval language.
Navajo language? Thank you. And Navajo culture. You didn't know anything about it? Either one?
No.
No, okay. I was just wondering. Okay. What do you like about school? Recess is always my favorite part. Okay. What do you do when your husband comes home drunk? I know, there's a question for you. Just let him sleep it off. And hope
Keep him awake.
he doesn't kill himself. Can you
That's a good
sleep like that?
position. So if they throw up, they just throw down.
Like keep him up for torture and then keep him up the next day too.
Does that work?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Do it again.
He won't do it again. Yeah, right.
It's like, go ahead, drink some more.
Right, do what mom say. No, no.
Do you check in with each other at the beginning of their meetings? That one doesn't even make sense to me. Do you eat dinner together? There's a good question. Does everybody eat dinner together in your house? Yeah, there's a good question. My daughter doesn't even have a table to eat at. So you don't want to go over to my daughter's house for dinner. She's a good cook, she just doesn't have a table to eat with.
Sometimes we eat on the floor, like as a family.
I guess that makes sense, but
Because traditionally, that's what we usually do.
eat on the floor.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
Tables are just for prep.
Oh, okay.
My family eats, but I like to take my plate and take it into the living room and watch
Watch
sports.
television, yeah, of course you do. Of course you do, okay. Asking more than one question at a time is confusing. In their reply, they will only answer one question and you may potentially miss important information. It is hard for you to both work and study. How does your family feel about this? So you need to be careful about asking more than one question. A lot of times you're going to feel like, well, if I can't I can't get a word in edgewise, so if I do get an opportunity, I need to ask them more than one question. Don't do it, because they'll only answer one of the questions. And it's usually the last one. Sometimes it's the first one. It all depends on the individual. Some people listen to the beginning and they don't hear the end. So you need to be careful. There are some cultures that this is very common. If you've ever been around somebody from New York City or somebody from the East Coast, somebody from Baltimore, Boston, or New York, a lot of times they will just pepper you with questions and expect you to answer all of the questions. If you are working with the police department and you're supposed to be interrogating somebody, try to stay away from this type of interrogation. How am I doing on time? Okay, 7 minutes, according to my watch. What's anybody else got? I've got 10:15, 10:13. 10:16,
10:15.
10:15. Well, let's average it out. Asking multiple choice questions may inhibit the client's exploration. How do you feel about that? Sad, confused, angry? However, with a client who has a limited vocabulary or isn't used to expressing their feelings in words, the occasional multiple choice question can help. But be careful, because in essence you're putting words into their mouths. If you've ever taken a survey from either the Republican National Committee or the Democratic National Committee, they will try to guide you into thinking the way that they think, and they will do this by giving you only choices that fit the way that they think. So you don't really have a choice. So you need not to be that person. You need to. Sad, confused, angry, happy. You need to give them
Can you give them an example?
different. Yeah, but see, the problem is that this person doesn't really have the vocabulary to give you a really good answer to the question. Yeah, so you have to give them a multiple choice. But you have to give them lots of multiple choices. Okay, so if you're around that person from New York City or that person from Boston or Baltimore, a lot of times they will just pepper you with questions. It's almost like a machine gun. They're rapid fire questions. While this form of questioning is common in some cultures, most people feel that this style fits more with interrogation, not with creating cooperative working relationships. Attempts at showing understanding should come between the questions so that you can show them that you are actually, what was I reading last night? Somebody answered one of my questions and they said that they were someplace and the individual said, well, you talk so slow and so deliberate that, you need to speed up your speech pattern. Which I was thinking, really? They want people to speed up their speech pattern? But if you're around somebody from New York or Boston or Baltimore or somebody from the East Coast, a lot of times it's difficult for them to get a word in edgewise, so they talk really, really fast, so that they can actually get their thoughts known. We have seen this in the hearings. Sometimes some of the individuals will talk really, really fast, and they'll interrupt. If you watch any of the news programs, there's a lot of interrupting going on, and so you can't hear anybody. But, the man will try to talk over the woman, which is not a good thing. Okay, so be careful of the rapid fire questions. But if you're around somebody from the East Coast, that's very, very common. Why don't we stop right here and we'll pick this up next time. After chapter 9, I am going to go to how we counsel people online.